signed all the mortgage papers, he signed everything else. Guy who bought my house didn't wire.
I just think it's up for us to, I just sent it out as a protocol thing to look at for y'all to.
Okay.
I mean,
It's there.
it's impossible to like off today because they have to go to a practice now, but if you're playing a game, there's no reason for us to spend the night. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, all right.
I mean, we do it for the football championship.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's fine.
Right.
With the U-Haul truck.
Okay.
So you are able to eventually get the. Well, superintendent of the building, so I get along very well, and,
I need to get them to-
like here, he might not get a physical key, but the code that thing is not, so. I know nothing, you know, Sergeant Schultz. Like, he's from Guam, my wife's from Guam, they paid it off. You know.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Are you okay? Yes. I know. So my time. You are.
I didn't see it. I didn't see it. But.
Well, I just sent it to myself. I don't know if like this.
Thank you. I don't want you to get too comfortable.
I said.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I haven't had one.
I'm gonna go, I know some of this. I was Okay, so good morning, everyone. So we want to go ahead and get started because I know you all have been pulled out and we want to just, you know, kind of wrap up what we've been talking about. I know that for the good of the order, you all presented language. Just so you all know, Ms. Rochelle is on because I wanted to make sure that everybody had access, even if your people couldn't. I just wanted to make sure. So what we talked about the last bargaining session, just to recap, because everybody wasn't here, was you all gave an updated or newly formed MOU that you wanted us to consider with language. What we talked about is the fact that we had agreed upon last spring that language would be up, full book language would be discussed in spring 2021. However, what you all shared back with us was that you felt that the MOU that you were presenting last week did deal with COVID and compensation. We received it, we took it, we told you we could not answer on that day because I need to go back to the board and executive session. Kim Banks and I did do that. And so that's why we were able to get back as soon as possible. I know there were some concerns, but you all did not want to wait until, or, you know, and so we were able to get in. And so we have a counter that Mr. Dietzen will address. Or to them, and I'm gonna walk around and give you all the remaining. Just so that you can. I'm gonna make sure the principal, give me a second. I'll make sure the principal too.
Oh, fine.
I know, okay, you and Sue. I'm looking at who's here, Sue Michelle's on the phone, so I don't have to worry about, I want you all to have it.
The first page really is not much, it's just stylistic, I think we borrowed from the last thing. Some of the language not really needed. The second page, I think, gets to the heart of it. I think the administrator's goal is not to use your January 15th and April 5th dates with all day long mandatory planning, but there may be some claim that is needed. Some meetings, some professional development. We're going to ask them to make every effort not to fill the day. If something can be done in an email or something can be done online quicker, that is what we're going to ask. I think everybody knows this is a difficult time for planning, given how the delivery is going. But we don't want to absolutely commit to 15th and April 5th, 100%. But we have some language to assure you this is not going to be a 7.5 hour day training session at the Howe building or virtually.
Can I add one more thing, Leonard? The other issue is if we are going back and forth, like we're opening it up, there may have to be sometimes like, and I'm using Ms. Clemens, I know Ms. Rochelle's online and Mr. Burgess, there may be a call for a meeting virtually that says, hey, lunch times are changing due to the number of kids coming back or leaving. There may have to be some adjustments school-wide that principals will need to address with staff. So how that's shared out, we will ask them to be cognizant, but we cannot say that there will be no meetings on the planning day.
And we, from everything the governor's office saying, there is going to be statewide testing. What it looks like, how it's going to happen, I know there's going to be statewide testing. Same, they're talking about comparing exams to pre this year, so looking at 18, 19, skipping a year, and then this year. So there's going to be, like I say, testing. There are some hopes that will be passed. I don't believe that's going to happen. That's every indication. So how that comes to life and what that looks like, there may be PD on that. How do we do that? How do we do that with hypothetical higher kids at home? Do they have to come in on our regulated computers? I would think yes, but I don't know. What do you do with those students? So it's going to be some issues that there's going to be some, I forget, there's already some heartburn. I've heard people projecting how, again, not all day, but there will be some issues to be discussed. And I think the message has been heard that this is a particularly sensitive time to think. Now, comp time, we have it down listed as the three ways to get it and earn it. This year only, we will allow it to be carried over because we understand if you earn it this year, you just may not be able to use it. So to be fair, we'll roll it over to next year. We kind of accepted the reasons of how you all said it can be used, which is pretty fair. We would like to work with you on the final page on what a consistent form looks like. In every district I go to, every building has a different way of doing this. there's one person informally who knows who owes what. And when that person's away on FMLA, nobody knows. That's usually the bookkeeper, the secretary. It's always a mystery. So to formalize this, so we could say to the teacher, you have 32.5 hours. I think it will be a lot easier for HR, teacher, principal, everyone to know debit and credits. Because it's just different for the two buildings. In most districts, it's a handshake. It's not even a writing. So principal says to teacher, I know you've been around lately a lot. Go home early Friday, have kids leave. And it's just,
We don't want to do that. We want to formalize it. And we're going to work with the benefits department and your board to do that.
not a complicated, we're talking one sheet, one page, one easy, maybe in each place, the teachers, some sheets, or something simple. Other than a handshake, there's a lot of deals cut, and, that we hear this everywhere, we want consistency. So we will have to get with our administrators and say, there's a new method for comp time. And it's not emails and conversations, so we can record it. I do think, I don't know why, this is an issue that some people call it board leading, just call it all kinds of different things. And if you ask anyone exactly how much you have, no one usually knows. They know they have a lot. Some districts X out certain days.
Yeah.
So the carryovers to help you all, because this year is so stressful.
And we know that teachers are being pulled, and we talked about that, the contact time, so this will assist in that. But we want to formalize it so that it looks the same in every building. So I'm going to work with Ms. Faulkner. There are several forms that float around, and many of the principals, when they submitted their comp time plans, some of them have a formal way, but I want it to be consistent across the board, and it'll be an opportunity for teachers to sign off and an administrator. So we know how many hours it is. There's no discrepancy. And then a copy will be kept so that we can maintain that and how it's utilized, okay?
There are,
Questions?
question is when you go to the second page for the parts about the case. October 30th is missing from the.
Well, October 30th is done. We know that there's no way, guys, not to have a meeting on October 30th with your building principal. However, November 2nd, and I cannot imagine, that's why I have the principals here today, what their October 30th looks like. I understand, and you all have put a request in, the superintendent heard it, which is why we granted the November 2nd. I think you and I spoke briefly about like a no-fly zone, and I wanted them here to kind of give feedback that week as they're preparing grades and whatnot, keeping meetings at a minimum, and so that teachers don't feel the stress of like having more time to kind of do an extra couple of things to kind of solidify going into the next 9 weeks. Is that?
So just in the same way we agreed upon some language during pre-planning that kind of said that like X number of hours would be the maximum that would be used. So for those days, I know it says every effort will be made, but what is a required amount of time out of 7.5 hours that a principal would like it be limited to 1.5 hours of needed time to ensure that 6 hours were there for individual. I don't know what the time frame would be, but if we were able to quantify it or at least get a reasonable estimate of what that might look like.
The reason why I'm hesitant and I'm looking around and Sue and Mr. Burgess and Ms. Clemens, my concern is this: every school is different. I'm not sure the numbers of students coming back. I know there's over how many thousands of kids coming back, but what it looks like at each site, what that brings into thinking as we plan. So Sue, can you give an idea as to how principals, what you directed principals to do as it relates to preparing for the second 9 weeks?
Right, so, there are a list of logistical things that we need to look at. Some of that obviously is the number of students, how many students are coming back, how that impacts teacher assignments. So they're starting to look at those numbers, where those children are being placed, how that impacts their lunch schedule and their recess schedule. For this group of students coming back, now some schools have 20 kids coming back, some schools have 135 kids coming back. So the impact on particular schools is going to be different, but there are some common things that principals have been asked to look at. The big one, obviously, is that they are making those decisions pretty much with the faculty about if they're having to make a change in assignment for a teacher or a child. I did hear pretty unanimously that principals were looking at embedding those kids coming back in current classes, if they were able to do that, because for these kids, it's their very first day of school. They don't know about math, they don't know about temperature checks, they don't know about what the routine is in school. So all of those things are reminders that I know administrators need to be with their staff about. From an elementary point of view, is there anything you want to add to it?
I don't think so. I think we covered everything that we've been still looking.
So which means they'll have to have some time with staff to kind of, because you all are thinking about it. I'm looking at Rebecca and, what's your last name?
Smith.
Ms. Smith, but your first name is Shalane.
Michelin.
And I know that you all are thinking too, when your kids come back, I think one of you had said like a new first day, but there's some logistical things that your principals have to talk to you about. You'll want to hear that feedback. So to say you can be done in 15 minutes, whatever can be shared via email, I'm sure principals would do, because they're trying to prepare too. But whatever cannot be, or they think for the good of the order should be done in a different way, may take a little bit more time. Mr. Hanson, you were gonna say something.
Well, one thing, it's the 19th, not the 15th.
Oh, okay, changing that.
And other thing is, I know active shooter, they have to do a presentation and watch that. So there is some things that schools have to do and have to sign off on, so the teachers have to do that. I know some of them are doing it on teacher planning day to the 30th for them to do that during their own time, but it is a, it's a program that they have to go and log and do. It has to be done. Down the road, I know we still have testing coming up, so there'll be meetings and things they have to do for FSA. So, I mean, the teacher planning days, I mean, it's not that they meet, quantified time would be very difficult for schools. I understand, but I think the principals will work to give them time, but I can't put a 4-hour, 2-hour, or an hour. I think it'd be very difficult.
It just
for the other
depends. I
schools.
mean,
Right.
depending on the pandemic. I just think there's so many other factors.
Right.
But what I hear both of you saying is, it shouldn't be all day. Every effort will be made not to make a teacher sit in a,
Right. I don't know of any really at secondary level right now that are doing much more than active shooting, maybe a little faculty meeting or something on the 30th.
right.
And most of the time, I haven't heard from anybody about anything much more than that.
So I think secondary definitely always has a little extra time when it comes to the planning portion, especially like in the pre-planning piece.
You said secondary?
Yeah, there's like one faculty meeting on the Thursday before school starts up, but, in elementary, it could be, you can hold for IFP, or RTI, you can hold for like 14 different things, and as a teacher planning day, the teacher is not always able to plan per the title of the day.
Right.
So,
I hear what you're saying.
and I understand there's also language in the contract that says that, there's something about email will be used to minimize the faculty meetings, if you send an email, send it an email, that kind of thing.
I don't even know what faculties are meeting in person.
So,
If there are, they're small groups.
well, virtually Zoom, whatever it is, but when
Yeah.
it comes down to some of the assignments, teacher assignments and schedules,
Yeah.
it sounds like most of the time is on the logistics and how to make it work, not necessarily the dissemination of what it looks like in terms of implementation at the school site.
Okay.
So that could be something that is.
Definitely, we definitely would encourage that. Whatever can be shared out via email. We don't need meetings. Like
So, to that extent, where it says every effort will be made, I don't know, what's the process you guys would like to go through, like a formal counter proposal, edit it up on board like we did with Shane, just trying to understand what you guys have in mind. What right now.
Yeah, what do you mean?
When we went through the MOU, we made edits and things to the MOU based off of the input that everyone was providing. If this is.
So what would you like to change with that? Would you like to say, you just referenced something about email, say that again, Scott, the part, when you were explaining to me what you just said as it regards to using emails and things to share information?
Yeah,
Are you trying to add that language to it?
well, between that portion of it, could be a possibility, it's already in the contract.
Right, so I'm saying, do you want to say, in addition to following, tell me what you want to say,
Well, one is.
because I have Vicky here.
Right. Basically, wanted to say that no more than 2 hours will be used for meetings and the other, whatever, 5.5 hours will be teacher training.
Okay, we'll take that under consideration. Is there anything else?
And if there's anything that is over 2 hours, that LCTA will be notified with rationale as to the reason for that. And then the other issue is, and then we might have, of course, to have the October 30th back and then that 2 hours taken into consideration. And then the other portion of that was the IEP preparation for the ESE teachers, not part of the comp time portion.
We removed
But
it.
we know that we've been trying as much as possible to recognize the amount of workload that goes in after those folks, and that caseloads can be pretty high at a number of school sites, and it grows every year to a certain degree. So,
Yeah, no, I'm clear. Yeah, okay, we can sidebar, we can, we took it out because, and I hear what you're saying as it relates to, because I've had to help with IEP meetings and writing IEPs as a classroom teacher. The caseload looks different at every school site. The issue that is before us is from someone, I'm gonna use Rebecca, just because you're sitting here looking so nice. And Rebecca works every night at home. She takes an additional 3-4 hours worth of papers to grade, so does Kim. She writes her lesson plans at night. Kim does all these other things in order to be prepared for the school day. I have no way of formally knowing how much time is spent on any of you all or Ms. Shawanqua at night, what you do to prepare, or even in the morning. Some people do it in the morning. All I'm saying is when you start quantifying who does what when and given the additional time, that's very difficult because it looks different at every site. And every teacher goes above and beyond. I want to be careful with that because when you're an ESC teacher, part of your responsibility is to the IEPs. I hear what you're saying about the caseload, but I want to be careful because at his building, her building, at Ms. Rochelle's building, it looks different. And so to say that every IEP every teacher who's doing an IEP should be awarded additional comp time for completing that. I know how important they are. I know it's required. Then somebody's gonna come to me and say, well, look, I just want you to know I have kids I'm keeping documents on. I'm getting ready to go to MTS. Like, how is this being quantified for me? I'm doing it beyond does that make sense? So I want to be careful about how we award that additional time.
Well, I will say, like, this year specifically, I usually have my IEPs done weeks ahead of time.
Okay.
And this year with everything, the changes in the classroom, the
Yeah.
cleaning, the scheduling, all that stuff, I have one meeting on Thursday and I haven't even touched the IEP.
Okay.
I have extra with the COVID stuff, I guess, and maybe could we put something about being on site while doing IEPs, not doing it at home type thing.
Okay. We'll take that into consideration.
Here's one of the things that we have done in the process, and having a wife as an ESC teacher and how sometimes she would handle it. An abnormal period. I have an abnormal amount because new kids have come into school. I have to do something. Someone has transferred from a different state. want to move into separate IEP, something like that. She advises her administrator, hey, it's gonna give me, this is gonna take me a while based on X, Y, and Z. And usually it's worked out with the administrator, an additional amount of time based on that. But it's not like, I'm just gonna take something home, not advise my administrator, oh, I worked an extra 6 hours this night, I'm making something up, and then walking in with a comp slip.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I can understand that. But when it's something abnormal,
No, and your example is fewer than most. What will be interpreted by this is that anytime someone takes an IEP home, they're gonna have, or works on IEP after the traditional work hours, they're gonna be given comp time. It doesn't, your language that you gave to us didn't say,
I respect
like
that.
Rebecca said, on site, if it's an additional hour beyond the workday. It didn't say that. It said for writing IEP.
Understandable, I'm just
Okay.
thinking of, like, Scott just said, if we want to add, you know what I mean?
Okay. We've added it. We just need to caucus now. Is that it?
We're gonna call this as well, just make sure that I get it from everybody.
Okay. So what we did, Rebecca, Vicky, can you read back what you put down for?
I just put a note in here about ESE teachers and IEPs must be worked on at school and not at home after the normal workday in order to receive comp time approved by their administrator.
Agreement or whatever. You want
Or
to
in
take that?
agreement with their administrator.
I think it needs to be a special situation.
Okay, so,
Like he just
Like
said.
he just said?
It's gotta be something out of the ordinary.
okay,
Because then they're doing the same thing as grading papers.
okay.
I mean, they're all getting, what's
So
the
you're saying in
difference?
special circumstances, I hear Rebecca saying at the school site, remaining beyond that the
Gotta be.
school site. Okay,
Where something special has to be,
Read to prior.
right.
You don't
Okay.
have to- you have to just walk in.
Okay.
It's gotta be something special.
you say something, Kim?
Nope, I'm just listening.
Okay, all right,
We'll call this. Thank you.
okay.
I'm gonna drop one by. Triple pack.
That's what I'm talking about.
You know how many times I go to the store now, I see it.
Always take a picture.
Really?
Okay, so what we did, guys, was, I'm gonna give you a set. We went back through in our meeting and we looked at adding in. Look at the spelling, then I can say. Okay. So we went back and looked at what you asked for. We went back to October 30th. Okay, there is a issue on here we printed and we can make the editorial change again. What we did was we went in and added, you all asked us to give consideration to the 2 hours.
What's waiting time?
The planning time, and Leonard can go through that. And we said,
So we added after every effort, because it's good in the every effort to have these kind of meetings. So if it's not more than 3 hours, if you're less than half together, we'll be scheduling meetings, et cetera. Sometimes we don't think that we use, if it is, we have some factor. We also heard you on the ESC language. You need to move it as to how it's earned. or
yeah, it's down.
We have it underlined on the third page.
Sorry, this is the wrong space.
It's in the wrong page. So if we earn, IEPs must be worked on at school after the normal workday. Granting of content will be pre-approved by the school administrator upon the explanation of special circumstances. And if someone does related to, you also need to know upload management to, we need to write a case that's different. So internally, we can also work on the issue from above. Our desire is not to have everyone, our desire is to spread things out. So we can also tell administratively, but we need help. So if someone all of a sudden has 40 and then that does happen. But they may not feel comfortable saying something.
And to that, thank you, Madam, because I think that's something that we're trying to sit down on, like, sure. Sometimes before we get too far into November for the holiday, have to do not just that, just LCTA, work with, I think that is those on trying to address some of those caseload issues and the things that were coming up, and we make sure that we get that taken care of, and that we're probably prepared for December on.
Now, the one thing we do want to make sure that we take note in is we have always heard teachers share, and even as a teacher, and all the persons sitting in here who've been in classrooms have always wanted to be treated as professionals. So just like the doctor's office charges you $25 when you don't do your due diligence and cancel an appointment, all these people who are considered professional, what we don't want to happen is a teacher show up at the end of the month and say, oh, I had all these 10, I did them. You see what I'm saying? Like, so if you're organized and you want us to make sure that we're respectful and honor this agreement, it's our expectation that teachers won't wait till last minute and then say, now I need to do all of this comp time because I did all of this. If there's unusual circumstance like Rebecca and Leonard just referenced, we want them to be upfront and say, hey, in addition to this, I'll have this month. This was unexpected, so I will need to, does that make sense? We don't want this to be abused.
Right.
Okay, all right, that's all. I wanted to say that carefully because I don't, it's a process to write 90P and I get it. So I
Yeah,
just want to
and
make
they're
sure.
looking more like coming back to the second 9 weeks of having the ones ESC things that are going to go back to the order of having down and again, that's extended circumstance.
Right.
And I think we appreciate that you recognize this data because those students and teachers have been, they really will appreciate the fact that there's something that is starting to address some of the workload.
And we appreciate them, and many schools are already doing things for it's just different in every building, but this codify helps to codify it. We just made that change, we moved it where it needs to go, and our comp time is earned, we put it in the wrong spot. Is there anything else?
So on the, where you had,
Oh, we added October 3rd.
yes,
Back to there,
so
okay.
on October 30th, but there was, oh, that's right, contact, gotcha. When it comes down to the portion that talks about every effort shall be made by the administrators to not schedule full day meetings as set forth above. It mentions full day meetings and then it talks about 3 hours. So just reading it, it kind of says we're gonna avoid a full day. Is there any objection of just maybe no more than 3 hours may be used to schedule meetings rather than add an additional sentence?
That's fine. So where do you want to go?
Take out that first sentence. Yeah, every effort will be made to have no more than
Because it
3 hours.
mentions full day and it kind of gives an indication that when someone else reads it, that there could be a full day meeting.
So take out again, say it again.
The first sentence.
Every effort will be
No,
made.
not the whole person.
Yeah, it says every effort will be made
Oh,
to have no more than
To have
3
no-
hours.
so just take that, just say,
That out.
Starting after, I'm gonna let Ms. Lantis say, it. Go ahead.
Ms. Schwank, say it there, please.
Oh, I'm saying every effort will be made by administrators not to schedule more than 3 hours. of meeting.
Okay,
That's all we're doing. Okay, you know, just take out the whole.
okay.
That's the concern I have with that is that it says that every effort shall be made not to have more than 3, but then it says no more than 3 hours. So one says that you would have the ability, so we can
Keep the last sentence.
just keep the last.
Yeah.
Okay.
No more than-
Just say no more than 3 hours in bulk. Okay, that's
No
fine.
more than 3 hours, that's it, yeah.
Okay.
Um,
You used up your quota. There's no,
we've done this
Just
much longer.
vernacular.
The other portion was on the, down in compensation, it says it is required to sit with students during. Our contract speaks to a duty-free lunch, so we would like to change the required to requested.
Yeah, it's when they're requested.
And I know that that's
Okay.
something.
that's fine.
No, there are some,
Right to go.
I want to do.
Go on to work.
You're requesting.
And this happens with elementary more than it happens with secondary, about 7 per class, but the splitting of classes. So when it comes to the compensation, item bullet, it says receive students from a split class. And when you take on more students, then what is required because there's no cell.
Now, Scott, I don't know if we can do that because because the issue is if a class is split at an elementary level right now, we got some classes with 10 kids or 3, they may get 2 kids a class. That gets into that means we have to determine for each student, you have to put a price. You get 10. We're in good faith, we're already going.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying that there's a portion of this that really speaks to secondary, but it's not going to address, because very rarely does an elementary teacher get to substitute for another teacher class because they still have their class. So if there has to be something thought of outside the box, that's what we're asking, because or else they're just not going to receive it for those types of things.
Who won't receive it for those types
The
of?
elementary teachers, when they're sub- or when they're receiving.
We split.
Yeah. I know what you're saying.
Yeah, and our focus is not to work for them.
Yeah, this is just this is to a war where we know that like we've got the contact time, like we know kids, like I can use your school because I'm on the list. So I see what happens on rainy days, right? So this is what we're trying to do in good faith but I struggle with that.
I think the concern this year especially is a lot of teachers were nervous about COVID.
Right,
So then you're putting more kids in their room. Already that bugged them years prior. This year it really does. And it is us acting as a sub for that teacher. And it's just this year because of these circumstances, not something we want to have every year. We're trying to make these teachers feel at ease, like at least we know you're going out of your way. We know you're getting extra kids. We know you have to stay, so all this stress, but we do appreciate it.
I haven't done this year because I'm just not trying to do it. But I was saying with class, maybe 15 times a year.
It can get, it depends on if you had the subs that will come to your school and who was some, and if you have.
that's what I'm saying, it's too many, because I have some schools who don't do it at all.
Right.
Who don't do it at
Well,
all.
and that's part of the hope is that it will discourage men from doing it and try to find another way.
Right, and I've
Because we
also
don't
had.
want to mix classes.
Yeah, but I have not heard, I've only heard, I think honestly, once or twice this year because our pairs are being pulled in and paying time and a half.
Mhm.
So I know for a fact it's not, but
Right.
like Leonard said, we'd have to, that would be, because we'd have to go back, there's no way to quantify that. I mean, like for every 2 kids, you get 10, you see what I'm saying? Like, how do you do that? And every school doesn't do it. And like you said, I don't,
I think we're more than that halfway.
yeah.
Purpose of this. I think it's really from negotiation. What we are getting in return is hopefully people who continue to do the right thing in our process. I think that's a real great thing. But we are accepting almost all of them.
Yeah.
We recognize that. I know, we really appreciate it.
I know you have
When we
one
started taking about 7 for a class that there was group of individuals that
Let me ask a quick question, just for clarification.
Sure.
So you said about student contact time. what was your mention in reference to the comp plan? Is that outside, so the student contact time, which we know is an issue.
Mhm.
Is this going to be resolving some of that?
Yeah,
Yeah, cool. All right.
yeah. And not only that, guys, after talking like in separate, like enclosed, like when you all left.
Yeah.
Like I hear so many about what some principals are doing to compensate the word teachers. I think I agree strongly with Leonard that we have gone above, but we should. I'm not saying we should.
Yeah.
Everything.
So with that being said, can we just have about a 2-minute break, 2 minutes, about something that we already know is on the table that we need to see if this will be a resolution? Does that make sense, Leonard?
Yes, but I don't want to resolve the grievance. regarding-
Yeah.
Correct, that's what, I want to make sure that that's not what's happening.
And we'll let our other folks who.
Okay.
No, hey, we just show up every day, just like you guys, man.
You really are.
Well, appreciate
Stress.
that.
Stress, it's the
I
done.
mean, yeah, you
Oh, man. Well, listen, y'all hang in there.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it. Okay. Thanks, Sue.
All right, for point of clarification, I know this happens, for example, when it comes to using, sick time, in lieu of using stop time in lieu of sick day. There's, these are the types of situations where you have a doctor's appointment in the morning and you're using an extra hour or two during the time, where kids may be present or something like that, but it's one of those types of scenarios. Are you okay with?
Yes,
situations like
we said that. We want them to use comp time before they use it, yes.
Okay.
That was the first one, and the other one was this, the intent in one particular section says that it's the carryover to the 21-20-22 as far as the comp time. But it sunsets at the end of June 30th, 2021. But even during our discussion, that means this summer it would sunset rather than when it comes over. But then we're also talking about teachers may not be able to use their time this year.
Right,
So
we're gonna allow them to
simply-
use it next school year, 21,
that
22.
That
the
one piece
intent
will
of the sick
not be
leave
sunsetted.
part would fall
Right, that
away.
one piece would not sunset, because what we're saying is you're earning it this year.
Okay.
You wanted to use it all this year.
Mhm.
You'd be able to use it next year. We'd roll over whatever you don't use this school year to next year.
Right.
But you won't earn time next school year, 21, 22, and it carry over again.
Right.
When we talk about carryover, the carryover sunsets this summer. Does that make sense? Teachers can utilize it next year. Okay.
Okay, in the same manner as, that's the part that I'm just trying to make sure that when we talk about the sick leave piece, because it says that that part sunsets this summer, is it the intent that it would still fall through next year since we came, since,
Okay,
there's some confusion.
it's the point, the fix will say, upon ratification will sunset on June 30th, 2021 school year, except for the carryover of unused comp time. And that's where my team doesn't run out anymore, but I'm gonna get it clarified. This is, believe me, when your phone rings, our phone rings, and we're always trying to. Except for the carryover of unused comp time for the 2021, 2022 school year. That's what will carry over, not how you get it, how you earn it, just how you use it in your hours.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
So Vicky's gonna add that. And then if we can go ahead and get it signed while we're here. And then you all can,
Go on, carry forward, justice, the great.
Educator again,
Yes,
teacher prospect voters.
And for future, when we talk about the full book and we start going into the.
I thought we've been talking about the full book since 1999. I mean, my God.
But when we do, those split classes do have an impact on those elementary classes, and there has to be a resolution that kind of addresses that, because they're not feeling, they're kind of like the ESC with the IEP part. They're not feeling that when they get the split class, the students come in, especially if numbers increase at our school sites, what that's gonna look like to their classes in terms of social distancing and other things, it has an impact on. So that's why, although
Except for the.
it may not be proportionate, if they're like, if you receive split students or receive 2 hours of comp time, just something that, if it's for a day, that there's whatever the day is.
So that's something to look at for the future.
Well,
Well,
I
what
would,
we'll do, what we'll do is we'll probably sit down with all the elementary school principals and say, who is doing this the best? And then try to look at how. And how are some playing, how are some not? And my guess is someone's figured out how to do this better. And then maybe they will result. But we're going to be 50 other topics, but I hear this topic, and it's not for some of this topic. I have heard it here, I have heard it addressed. We just got to get that through. It's like, this is over here, this is over here.
When we're starting our roll-up, which is we'll start doing the committees again, so we can do the collaborative bargaining again, would be great. When we start working in small committees, starting like maybe January, February, and we can start dividing them up and start planning to start moving forward, so that we can have our full book maybe done before August.
I'm all about.
So,
No, I'm all about moving
okay.
faster before we leave summer.
Because a lot of what we did when we worked in the summer, those smaller groups made a huge difference. Got done faster.
I know that.
Yeah.
if you sit down and change here and tweak whatever you do, but
Yeah.
that way it's. it moves
Some of those
along
things were like,
quicker
oh,
than
it did move.
Pass this
And
way,
it's like-
leave, and that, pass this way.
There was small groups, got together with individuals, so like everybody kind of divided. So we were on it, allowed to go in. And it was Jillian did one for curriculum.
Okay.
Shane did one for PE.
Right, and you
And Tina did hers for discipline and some other things. But they took specialized areas.
No more,
smaller
okay, okay,
groups,
all right.
And drafted.
Well,
who's
you
getting
know,
the-
Yeah.
if you can print 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, you were
But
on
you
the
all,
tail end of it. And so
Okay.
when we came across the table, it worked a lot
see, we're gonna
faster.
have, we're gonna have this content, not much. You're gonna probably want more, so we're gonna bring this.
Yeah.
Or you could to decide. What do you want? I know probably seven, but almost. So we're still going to be, obviously, maybe not as, it's not. It'll
This-
change, but
Who knows if this normal, this change will still be in.
Yes, I mean, not Leonard, is this right? Okay.
We're done.
Yeah, Scott,